All right, today we're jumping into a source that makes a claim so big, so wild, that it sounds like science fiction. It basically says there's a single hidden pattern, a universal code, if you will, that connects everything. And I mean everything, from ancient scripture all the way to the neurons firing inside your head.
I know what you're thinking. What on earth could those things possibly have in common? They seem like they're from totally different universes. But the source material we're digging into argues that they're not different at all. In fact, it says they're all just different languages describing the exact same underlying structure. Okay, so how is that even possible? Well, the key to this whole thing is a concept from math called isomorphism. Now, don't let the word throw you off. All it really means is that two things can look completely different on the surface, but have the exact same blueprint underneath. You know, it's like hearing the same song played on a piano and then on an electric guitar. Different sounds, different instruments, but it's still the same melody, right? That's isomorphism. Now, this idea of sameness isn't just some dusty old math concept. The source points out that we actually use it all the time. In fact, it's a super powerful design principle that runs the digital world we live in every single day. So let's make this real for a second. Take a look at this table. In programming, right, you've got dozens of languages, Python, Rust, you name it. But a single system, like a compiler, can understand them all. How? Because it doesn't care about the specific words. It only looks at the underlying structure, the loops, the variables, the stuff they all have in common. It's language agnostic. And you can see the exact same pattern with databases and with AI models. You always have many different flavors on one side and one single unifying system on the other that just deals with their shared isomorphic core. All right, so we've got this pattern in technology. It works, it's smart, it makes sense. But this is where the source material takes a huge, dramatic, and honestly a pretty mind-bending leap into something way, way bigger. The whole argument is that this isn't just a clever trick we invented for computers, it's a fundamental blueprint for reality. The source is proposing that the universe itself uses this exact same principle of structural sameness, connecting things you would never, ever think to connect. And just look at how ambitious this claim is. The source argues that this pattern shows up in Quranic theology, and in the way our own brains work, and in the mysterious 4,000-year-old Indus script, and even in the tensor networks of quantum physics. The argument is that, structurally, all of these things are secretly the same. And we're not just talking about some vague, poetic similarity here. No, the source goes way further. It proposes a direct one-to-one translation guide, a kind of universal Rosetta Stone that lets you map concepts from one of these fields directly onto another. Okay, you really have to see this table, because this is the core of the whole idea. Look at that first row. The concept of a conscious agent gets mapped to the Khalifa in theology, which means a steward or a guardian. The source claims this is structurally identical to the state of a single neuron in your brain, and to what physicists call a tensor slice, like one snapshot of a complex system. A global record of information, which is called the preserved tablet in Scripture, is mapped directly to the global state of the entire brain. I mean, these are truly shocking, direct comparisons. Let's just zoom in on one of these mappings to see how deep it goes. On one hand, you have this theological idea of best conduct, acting in the most moral, most righteous way possible. The source claims this is the same thing structurally as a concept in neuroscience called high integrated information. Now, that's basically a scientific measure for a state of peak consciousness, when your brain is at its most complex and unified. So a moral ideal is being mapped directly onto a mathematical measure of consciousness. And if you thought that was wild, the connections get even stranger. Here, a single symbol from that ancient, undeciphered Indus script is claimed to be isomorphic to a token state on an FPGA. An FPGA is just a special kind of computer chip, and a token state is basically one of its little on-off switches. So we're talking about a 4,000-year-old linguistic mystery being mapped to the most fundamental building block of modern computing. So, if all these different systems, religion, our brains, physics, computers, if they're all just different reflections of the same deep structure, what does that mean for us? You know, the people actually observing all this? Well, this is where the source makes its most profound and, I think, its most personal claim. I'm just going to read this next part directly from the source because it really packs a punch. It says, the conscious agent is not just an element of the system. The conscious agent is the isomorphism, the mapping that identifies the mathematical structure with the lived experience. So let's break that down. What it's saying is, you're not just a cog in this giant machine. According to this framework, you are the bridge. You're the translator. The very act of thinking about this, of understanding it, of seeing the connection between a neuron and a line of scripture, that is you, actively performing the translation. In this view, consciousness isn't a thing. It's the act of mapping these different realities onto one another. And that leaves us with this one final, really huge question to think about. If this framework is even close to being right, are we just another piece of this giant interconnected puzzle? Or is our consciousness the very thing that connects it all? The living, breathing isomorphism that allows the universe to finally see itself, and maybe to become whole.